Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so happy to be again at Bay of Bengal conversation, this time in liberated Bangladesh. Since in my previous life I was student leader in my country, Serbia, I'm particularly pleased that pro-democracy revolution in Bangladesh was led by its youth. Monsoon revolution, or second rebellion of Bangladesh, came at great cost of human lives, and it opened door to rebuilding democracy and economic prosperity of the country. But that transition is not going to be easy. Today with me, we have 5 friends of Bangladesh, great experts coming from all over the world with expertise in many different fields. Bearing that in mind, we will start by exploring the threats to institutions globally in the age of populism, but then we will move to Bangladesh and discuss how to rebuild democracy and institutions in this country. Let me start with Hallelujah Luli Wondimu, who is PhD candidate in politics at University of Oxford, United Kingdom, originally from Ethiopia. Hallelujah, could you tell us how is populism affecting democracy at the global level?
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm very happy to be here. It's a very interesting question. I think before examining the nexus between populism and democracy, we have to start from defining populism and how it is perceived and conceptualized by different parts of the world. So, in my view, I think populism has different features and it manifests itself differently in different places. Its relationship with democracy also is somehow shaped by the nature of the governance context, the security context. Some populism movements are anti-state, some are anti-establishment, some of them are anti-elites. For example, if you look at Latin America, if you go to Bolivia or Venezuela, at one point or another, populist movements collaborated with the state to undermine the elite. In some places, populist movements collaborate with the elite to overthrow government. So, broadly speaking, we can say that populism can be a great way to overthrow authoritarian regimes, to mobilize the masses for a common purpose, but it may not be a great tool to build a democracy. Especially where I come from in Africa, in the past 10-15 years, we witnessed numerous social and protest movements that succeeded in overthrowing authoritarian regimes in contexts where there's no free and fair election, the private press, or strong political parties, or mechanisms for a peaceful transfer of power. Populism and popular movements can be a great tool to mobilize the masses against in realizing regime change. But I would say that even though it can succeed, it's a potent tool in effecting regime change. It has 2 inherent problems regarding democracy, especially in countries where democratic systems are not very strong. The first one is populism can be used by regimes to suppress dissent. It can be used, to suppress dissent and suppress democratic rights for the sake of national identity, national cohesion, and national interests. But on the other side, it's a two-edged sword as well. Populist movements can undermine the integrity and autonomy of the state. And that may result in a transactional political and social order where the state is unable to provide basic services, be it education and health or security. So in both ways, populism as a regime or populism as a movement has their own problems, but at the same time, we should we should highlight the fact that in places where democratic elections are not possible, populist movements can be a great way to bring about democracy.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to ask Tanyel Taysi, Country Director of International Foundation for Electoral Systems for Bangladesh, originally from United States. Tanyel worked previously in many countries around the world, including Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Tunisia, Morocco, Liberia. Since your organization has in-house Democratic Resilience Lab, could you please tell us how to strengthen democratic resilience globally?
Yes, in 3 minutes. We're going to solve it all.
Yes, please.
All right. I want to say thank you to everybody in the audience for staying. I know this is the session where you'd rather be drinking tea, so thank you. I'll start by saying, why do we need to? Why do we need to strengthen democratic resilience? Because across the board, all of the organizations that measure democracy, and they all measure it in different ways, they're all coming up with the same understanding, the same outcome, which is that democracy is in decline around the world in every region. Democracy is contracting, right? VDEM in their last report said that there are now more autocracies in the world than democracies. 71% of the population of this world lives in autocracies, right? And democracy is not a fixed end state, so obviously countries they'll move along the spectrum. They'll come and go from being a democracy to maybe turning into an autocracy. But the whole point of measuring and trying to focus on democratic resilience is to try to stop this decline of democracy. And to stop the decline of democracy, democracies do need to be more resilient, right? Because it's becoming harder and harder to go against autocratization or whether it's from populism or other threats, right? Because populism is a major threat, but it's not the only one. So again, like democratic resilience has lots of different definitions. For our organization, the way we define it at IFES is the ability to maintain democratic functions and principles despite attempts by liberal actors to damage or diminish accountability structures. So what this means is that if state and non-state actors, and it's really important that we keep non-state actors in here because democratic resilience isn't only about states. It isn't only about institutions. It's also about people that live in these states and people who get services from these institutions, right? So if these people, if these institutions can maintain democratic norms and processes, then democracies can withstand these shocks, right? And so the way that IFES does this, like the nuts and bolts of it, is we would encourage the development of nomination processes that preserve the autonomy of judicial and other institutional bodies, because it's really important that there are checks and balances, and it's really important that the autonomy of institutions can be maintained. One of the main plays in the populist playbook is they want to get rid of and destroy checks and balances so that they can keep power for themselves. Also, building the capacity of things like election management bodies to hold credible elections, defending independent institutions' mandates, again, in proposed checks on their power. And then when you get into actual real democratic breakdowns, sometimes you can't work with institutions anymore because they're completely captured. In this case, you try to work with the people. Whatever way you can to help keep hope alive, to help to make sure that people understand what democracy is, and maybe it might not exist in their country right now, but there's a way to get it back. Thank you.
Thank you. Now to Selma Obarcanin, co-founder of SO Marketing Agency from Bosnia and Herzegovina from Southeast Europe. Selma, you are a communication expert and you also worked with IFES and Central Election Commission in your country. Could you tell us from communication standpoint, what are the biggest threats globally to the stability of democratic institutions?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm honored to share my thoughts today with all of you. So from a communication and digital marketing point of view, one of the biggest threats is obviously misinformation. I feel like on this conference, misinformation is a buzzword. Populist narratives can spread quickly on social media, eroding trust in the democratic institutions. Algorithms are always favorable to sensational and divisive content. We notice that. Also, that type of content engages the user, which can lead to more polarization. For example, attacks on judiciary or independent media can be paired with misinformation campaigns that confuse and mislead the public. To counter this, democratic institutions need to be more transparent, more two-way open, to use the communication in terms of two-way approach, also on digital platforms to keep the public informed and obviously to build the trust. I had example from the field. I had a chance and honor to work also with IFES back in my country. I was assigned the role of communication person who needs to build up a campaign that will devote it to a younger population. I need to create content that will actually attract younger population to go out and vote. And I'm seeing a lot of young faces today, and I have to say that I'm proud that you are open to learn and speak about pretty difficult topics as geopolitics, and this is the first stage. But also, we are all subconsciously or consciously aware how social media is affecting us every day. And I chose and used those platforms to conduct campaign that actually have done significant results. We had a big increase in terms of younger population who actually went and voted. So that could also be a case for Bangladesh, and indeed for any nation. The key lies in using digital tools, not only to inform, but also not to be threatened by it. Just to inspire action, ensure that democracy is resilient, inclusive, and representative. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'd like to ask Hadza Fadhli Robby, Assistant Professor at Islamic University of Indonesia, to tell us how populist politics have eroded democracy in Southeast Asia, particularly after elections in Indonesia and Philippines that happened recently.
Okay,
Please.
Thank you, Moderator, and thank you everyone for attending this session. So as in Indonesia, we just experienced an election in 2024 that resulted in the re-election of part of the old regime, which used to be part of the authoritarian government of Suharto. And this was also the case for Philippines in 2023 when they decided to also re-elect someone who is also a son of an authoritarian leader. There is the Ferdinand Marcos Jr., Bongbong Marcos. So these cases that we have witnessed in Southeast Asia represent a very remarkable case of how nations in Southeast Asia, that is Indonesia and Philippines, which used to be examples of democratizations in the region, are now a prime example of re-autocratization. And something that I would like to explain, especially to my Bangladeshi counterparts here and also to the students here, is that we should be ever careful whenever we are managing the process of democratization. What happened in Indonesia is that we are failed to somehow manage to stop those autocratic leaders with human rights violations to actually nominate themselves in the president election. And the last election in Indonesia was particularly dangerous to our democracy because the integrity of the judicial authority was being compromised by the political actor, especially by President himself, that used his power to influence the judiciary to actually be able to nominate his son as the vice presidential candidate to accompany the president. So this is something that is becoming one of the main issues that we have been talking since last year, and this is one of the signs that makes Indonesian democracy is falling into the state of autocratization. So I think that there are three signs why the failure is there in both Indonesia and Malaysian case. The first case is about failing integrity of institution. And I'm not only talking about the civil society, only about the governmental institution, but also civil society actors.
1 minute.
Okay. The second one is also about the party cartelization, in which no party has no ideological commitment to their values. And the third one is also how state is having such cooptation to civil society organization, especially to religious organization. And this also is a point that I will elaborate further in my next elaboration. That's it. Thank you.
And now let us move to the very important issue of democracy at the local level. I would like to ask Touseef Raina, co-founder of JK Policy Institute, youth-driven think tank in Kashmir region, to tell us, as a former mayor of Baramulla town in Kashmir, what are, in your view, major threats to democratic institutions at local level? Please.
Thank you, Jovan. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. In my view, coming from a conflict zone, violence and war are the greatest global threats to good and effective governance at the local level. Most of us haven't noticed how conflicts have become so common at various levels in our world, but the fact is that it's all around us and it's only spreading. Just look at what is happening a football match in Europe. Second point, hatred, suspicion and enmity towards other people, especially those who live in our neighborhoods, is another threat. We must remember that every religion teaches us to love and forgive, to respect others and to be peacemakers. In fact, Islam is known as the religion of peace. We are taught to make sure that our neighbors has food before we eat our own meal. The third point, climate change is an extremely big threat at a global level. Our governance system are not designed to cope with the terrible weather events that are taking place. Just look at the floods in Pakistan a couple of years ago, which government at any level could be equipped to handle the sort of challenge. I was reminded of how much we suffered during the floods in Kashmir in 2014. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And especially thank you for this important message about love and peace. Let's move to the second round. Hallelujah. I will start with you again. You have advised Prime Minister of Ethiopia in the past. What would be your advice, friendly advice, to the interim government of Bangladesh regarding major required reforms to rebuild democracy and democratic institutions in this country? Please.
Usually revolutions and regime change that follow protest and social movements, they suspend the law, they suspend rules and regulations and norms, and they significantly undermine the legitimacy and capacity of the state. And we may find ourselves in a context where state power is amorphous, especially if protesters and social movement leaders start taking control of power, and when the state gets weak because of the protests. So we may find ourselves in a position where it's difficult to tell where the protest movements end and the state start. So usually in an authoritarian context, when the state gets weak, it starts making concessions. It starts to make democratic concessions, but the difficulty is if the state does not regain its strength, it won't be able to provide security as a basic good and deliver social services. So it will create grievance among the masses for strong, and a demand for strong government will start to rise. The danger in this context is in an authoritarian context without strong institutions and strong mechanisms and processes to ensure an emergence of new systems and processes for a democratic transition. When the state tries to regain its strength, it will also regain its authoritarian nature. And the danger is some populist movements and social movements. They are very maximalist and they are very ideal in their demands. So that context and the lack of pragmatism in negotiating with the establishment, the military, and other key government agencies and institutions may result in a disillusionment that may result in the establishment re-emerging from the dark and retaking power. We've seen it across the world, but most importantly in Africa in the past 15 years. So the lack of preparedness, the lack of pragmatism among protest leaders and populist movements in dealing with governance and statecraft can be a great threat. So my advice is, yes, the state should be, accountability should be, at the forefront. State power should always be, power should always be made uncomfortable. But at the same time, we should put into account that one cannot be a revolutionary and a statesman at the same time. And that transition is not easy. So transitioning to statesmanship requires making difficult decisions, and many social movements, democratic movements and populist movements across the world, they failed in achieving their goal, or their revolution was hijacked by better organized forces, be it a military, organized political parties, or the bureaucracy and the elite, because of lack of an articulate and pragmatic political agenda that makes some concessions and recognizes state power and the complexity of governance.
And from your experience, what is the importance of security sector reform in democratic transition?
That's a very, very important question, because most of the cases that I've been referring to, for example, in the case of the African continent, the military, if the military is independent in cases of social and protest movements and revolutions, we witnessed, for example, when the insecurity and the protests reach a certain point, the military interferes and tries to present itself as a transitional authority to facilitate a birth of a democratic system, a democratic order. But we've seen in many contexts where those kind of contexts undermine the possibility of increasing democratic oversight, civilian accountability over the military. Because if the military is usually in charge of the political transition, it may jeopardize an emergence of mechanisms and processes that may embolden parliamentary oversight, democratic oversight, and democratic accountability of armed forces in the broader security sector, which will be a critical element of any democratic transition. So any democratic transition should, I believe, have a pragmatic and comprehensive plan of dealing with the wider security sector.
Thank you very much. Tanyel, how do you see the biggest threats to democratic resilience in Bangladesh, especially in this initial phase of democratic transition?
That's a huge question, thank you. And I want to really note that when I'm speaking here, I'm speaking based on experiences that I've had in other countries that have undergone democratic transitions. So nothing that I'm saying is calling out any actor or any entity here in Bangladesh, right? This is simply based on international experience in other countries like my colleagues here on the panel. But I think going back to those democratic indices that I was talking about earlier, Bangladesh has not fared very well on them, especially not in the past 15 years. It's been described as an electoral autocracy, or maybe at best a hybrid regime. So there was not a lot of democratic resilience to begin with, right? And then we have the transition. And this is also not the first transition that Bangladesh has experienced since 1971. There has been other transitions, Unfortunately, these other transitions were not able to produce a resilient democracy, right? And there was many reasons for this. We don't have time to go into all of them, so I'll kind of focus on institutions. And it's one of the most important reasons that we weren't able to produce a resilient democracy is because there wasn't an entrenchment of the separation of powers, right? There wasn't a focus on strengthening the independence of institutions, including an accountable and independent election commission, right? So you had institutional capture, and then when these institutions aren't able to function independently, you don't have democratic resilience. So really, we need to focus on independent institutions that are not going to be captured, and we also need to focus on, I think, really clear separation of powers, right? And we do need to have free, fair, and credible elections. This is a really important part of democratic resilience, but elections are not the only thing that matters, right? Other things matter as well. So I know I work for IFES, which is about electoral systems, but I do want to acknowledge that while elections are important, they're not going to get us there 100%. We also need to have a non-narrow way for the people of Bangladesh, all people of Bangladesh, to actually have their say in what these institutions look like, and also the people of Bangladesh to be able to just have their say writ large in what they want democracy to look like in Bangladesh, and in what they see as what Bangladesh should look like, right? What is Bangladeshi national identity? Is it something very narrow that only represents some parts of the population, or is it an identity that is inclusive enough to include more than just one group of people? So I think those are some things to focus on. Thank you.
And to continue with this, you mentioned, of course, free and fair elections. What are other specific reforms to counter populism in Bangladesh?
Right, populism. So I think we've had a really good discussion of what populism is, and also we understand that one of the main things that populists like to do is they like to break down institutions, particularly in checks and balances on institutions, especially the executive, right? So I think that we need to really be careful, again, going back to institutions. I am actually not an institutionalist, but I think in this case we do need to make sure that we have free, fair institutions across the board, and institutions that are resilient to capture by populists, right? Because they love to capture institutions. We also know that populists love to undermine pluralism, right? They like to define the people in a very monolithic way, right? And they also like to engage in othering. You are Bangladeshi, you are not, right? So the whole concept of what it is to be a Bangladeshi becomes this us versus them. Some people get to be part of that group, other people do not get to be part of that group. And so we need to be very careful that we don't fall into that trap, right? Where only some people are worthy of being counted as the people. If we're in a democracy, right? Democracy is ruled by the people, for the people, by the people. What people are we talking about? Are we talking about an inclusive group of people, or are we talking about maybe a smaller group of people? And so I think that that's something that we need to be really, really, really cognizant of, and focus on making sure that when we talk about the people, we kind of check ourselves to see who these people are. There's a lot of people being excluded, and then this also goes into the whole question of, national identity. What is the identity of Bangladesh? I know there's a lot of swirling around this going on right now. What does it mean to be Bangladeshi? Who are Bangladeshis? I think that if we really want to counter populism, we need to take a step back and recognize that the more exclusive we are in that notion of what our identity is, the easier it will be to succumb to populism.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hadza, could I ask you, how do you see the role of religion in a transition process in Bangladesh?
Yes, so far, as per my observation, is that the Jemaat Islami, one of the major opposition party in Bangladesh, has been playing a very monumental role in consolidating democratic process, although there might be several discussion on how they should be undertaking this role. But from my experiences in Indonesia, when we are talking about how religious civil society organizations are helping in process of democratic consolidation, is that the religious organization responsible for the democratic transition should be democratic and accountable at the first place. I mean, these religious organizations, whenever they are trying to enter the political system and to help with the democratic transition process, they should be able to democratize themselves from within. This is what happens with Indonesia's largest Muslim organizations, that is Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah. Both of these organizations were a major player in Indonesia's democratization, and if Jamaat Islami, which is both the civil society organization, also political party in the context of Bangladesh, is trying to be more democratic in the sense that they are getting more accountable to the Bangladeshi public, it will be better for Bangladeshi democracy and also for their leverage in Bangladeshi society as well. Of course, we know that there are a lot of discussions surrounding the ongoing unjust trials against Jamaat Islami politicians, from the made-up court trial during the previous regime. But hopefully this new regime, which is currently still under the management of caretaker, could be able to help Jamaat Islami to not only to regain their confidence, but also to have some new spirit that would encompass also the value of democracy and accountability in its party governance, so that they would be able to also integrate the Islamic political value they are advocating with democratic value. And this is something essential in many Muslim democracies, and this also helped Indonesia to be more democratic in especially after the years after 1998. Yep.
Do you think that strengthening Islamist forces could lead to a threat to secular society in Bangladesh?
I think not. As long as the Islamic political actor remain committed to the issue of the advancement of human rights and democracy, and this is something that could be reconciled. That is why it is very important for Islamic political actor to be open to another actor. I mean, like to have constant discussion and also to have constant engagement. And this is something that we have done in Indonesia. The Islamic political actors are always in open discussion with non-Muslim political leaders, so that they could be able to maintain communal harmony. And this is something that we've been maintaining since 1998. In 1998, Indonesia almost on the threat of Balkanization. We almost became divided countries because of communal conflict happening across of the region. But what happened afterwards? What happened afterwards is due to the activity of the religious leaders trying to intervene conflicts in various parts of Indonesia where there are the tensions between Christian and Muslim happening, where the religious leaders are jumping in those conflicts, we are able to at least decrease the tension and to lead the community forward with new ideals of democracy and human rights. So it is about how leading religious actors here in Bangladesh are trying to transform their Islamic political idea to be aligned with democratic and human rights value.
Thank you. Since you are also expert on politics of India, how do you see potential role of India in democratic transition in Bangladesh?
This is kind of difficult and tricky question to begin with.
This is why we are here.
Yes. So, whenever we are trying to see India's role, of course, in Bangladesh now there is a changing perceptions, especially with new political actors are trying to at least be more open to another neighbors, and this is always the issue in Bangladesh of how Bangladesh could be balancing the relation with all of the countries in South Asia. So what I'm trying to say here is that India should not be looking Bangladesh in very cautious manner, even though Bangladesh might look like a major headache for Indian policy makers. India should realize that Bangladesh is a formidable partner, especially in the terms of economic cooperation. And this is something that India should be really careful, should be having utmost attention whenever they are trying to maintain relation with Bangladesh. Something that they should do is not to heavily interfere with what Bangladesh people are trying to decide for themselves, because this is a process that Bangladeshi people are trying to start and advocate since the first place. A lot of issues surrounding the involvement of Pakistani agents, I think those forms of misinformation is very problematic, because we need to really understand that this is a genuine interest for Bangladeshi people to democratize themselves, and therefore India should be really careful whenever they are trying to express their position on the something that Bangladeshi people is trying to start, not by foreign intervention of some kind. That's what I'm trying to say here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Touseef, now about local democracy in Bangladesh. How do you see the major reforms that are needed to strengthen local democracy in this country?
Only my dear friends from Bangladesh can know what they require and what is the best way for them to strengthen democracy in their beautiful country. But speaking from my experience in Kashmir, the first thing we need for us to able to re-establish local government institutions and systems in peace and public order. How can we have fair elections or a functional municipality if there are rights or some other issues? Second, we need a transparent and honest electoral system. If the government agencies, some other officials ignore or even help those who go around late at night to distribute money or bag of rice, or even help them just because they are favorites of the government, then people lose faith in the system. In Kashmir, I have realized that we need an inclusive atmosphere so that women and young people and those who may be very poor or marginalized may all feel that the system is there to help to make things better for them. That should be true everywhere. Thank you.
You mentioned youth, and of course you are running a youth-driven think tank in Kashmir. How do you see future role of Bangladeshi youth in democratic process? Do you think that they should create a political party? Do you think that they should continue working as a watchdog? Or you see their role differently?
First of all, youth should get involved with social issues at the grassroots. When I was still a student, I started a movement called the Global Youth Foundation. We took up issues like drugs, human rights, inter-religious harmony, and women's concerns. Youth must also take every opportunity to get involved in the politics at the local level. At the last minute and without any preparation, I jumped into the municipal elections that were held 4 years ago in Kashmir. I lost in the first time, but won a by-election the next year and was immediately elected as the president of municipal council. That was only because people had already seen my work through my grassroots activism. They trusted me and so gave me the responsibility. I worked hard, staying close to the people and moving on the streets to make sure everything was working. That is why a lot of young people urged me to stand for the assembly elections which were held recently. They came and worked for my campaign day and night, even though I had no money to pay them. Leave alone bribe people for vote for me, like some others tried to do. And thanks to their hard work, I got more than 5,000 votes, even without funding. Many people think that a political party is important because people know its image and work for many decades, but I choose to remain independent, even though I knew that it would be a disadvantage. A party runs an overall campaign, its big leaders. Campaigns work for the advantage of each and every one of their candidates. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Selma, what is the role of communication in building strong institutions in Bangladesh? How to maintain popular support for reforms that are very often difficult?
Building strong institutions in Bangladesh requires transparent communication and active engagement with the public through different digital channels and also through diverse content. Nowadays, you can usually see how democratic institutions are usually using official press articles and pictures of people shaking hands, and that's about it. They need to be diverse. They need to create content that is digestible to the wider audience. They need to connect, but always keeping in mind the transparency. For example, institutions can regularly post updates on social media and create opportunities for citizens to engage directly with them, with the official survey, with Q&As and etc. This is not only a case where visibility could be increased, but also it could actually encourage the public for the interaction and support, while again helping strengthening the trust and democracy. Let's remember the so-called monsoon revolution that offered a valuable example of how misinformation was countered during a crisis. Gen Z, at the time when internet was banned as alternative, used Bluetooth as a tool. They shared accurate information and mobilized the public despite the regime attempts to control the narrative through internet shutdowns. That was really interesting example. This underscores the importance of innovation and adaptability in fighting disinformation while fostering the transparency and again, trust in democratic process. Also, I think combination of AI tools, AI-driven solutions, credible communication channels, and collaboration with trusted voices, Bangladesh can build a robust framework to counter misinformation and ensure an informed, engaged population.
Thank you. You mentioned already disinformation and the need to counter this. And of course, Bangladesh is now faced with disinformation campaign coming both from a previous autocratic regime, but also from some of the neighboring countries. Do you have some additional advices to Bangladesh how they can counter that?
Yeah, to overcome misinformation, Bangladesh should use strategically digital tools for quick response and clear communication. I know it sounds easier than it's done, quick response. But an idea is, for example, for a democratic institution to create a hackathon and partner up with potential IT companies who they could actually make a platform who will scan misinformation and react through notification. That's just an idea. Also partnering potential influencers. I don't like to call them influencers, rather smart influencers, people who have done something useful to the society and they have certain influence to the community. If they partner up with them, they could have another source of communication voice that they can spread the precise narratives and trustworthy information. So partnering with independent media could also be a solution, and fast-checking organization also strengthens credibility and build resilience against misleading campaigns from both internal and external sources. So those were my observation and few ideas, and hopefully one day they will be implemented and I would be happy to support.
Thank you very much. Thank you all of participants for and panelists for these introductory remarks. Now I would like to open floor for any questions from the public. We have 4 mics. You know the drill, so please come to one of the mics and ask the question. And could you please briefly present yourself and tell us whom you would like to ask that question?
Hello, my name is Dishi. I work in Bangladesh Youth Leadership Center, so I basically work with youth. So I have 2 questions. My first question is to Touseef, Mehraj, Raina. you say that youth needs to work from grassroots level and they should work in societal level to gain popularity, and rather they don't necessarily have to have a political party. So being a woman in the society of Bangladesh, if I want to work in the grassroots level, and I might face a lot of barriers. So what the government can do right now to create a system so that more women can come to the work in the grassroots level and might actually be embedded in the politics, so that greater changes can be possible in the society and make the society more inclusive.
Thank you. Please.
I'm an assistant professor at the Department of Political Science at the University of Dhaka.
Just a bit louder, please.
I'm Rashid Alam Bhuya. I'm an assistant professor at the Department of Political Science at the University of Dhaka. It's good to hear from the panelists. I think many things are covered up in their discussion, but one of the biggest crises that Bangladesh is currently facing is the challenges of national integration, particularly after this huge revolution. I think the biggest problem is the nation is actually divided in two camps. One is for 1971 and independence, and those who believe that 1971, they believe that other groups are anti-independent groups. So that's the biggest divide and rule policy that the previous regimes used to do with the whole nations. And they created tagging, they created divided people into different groups because of their ideological differences, or people doesn't speak or buying those like, I have never seen any countries in the world selling the independence, memories of independence for their politics like the previous regimes did in Bangladesh. And that's how it has hugely divided the society.
And your question is?
Yeah, my question is how, and they also created like politicized media center, politicized civil society for the sake of their agenda and propaganda. So my question is like how a politicized civil society, which is still provocating those lies and which is still trying to create that division, particularly the young leaders who try to take away Bangladesh, take forward Bangladesh to a new era of like democracy, freedom, restoration of the moral values. But the old generation, they're continuously taking us back to the 55 years of the memories of independence.
Thank you.
Every country in the world, they did the independence, but we need to go forward and we need to deal with the existential threat of the nation. So how a politicized civil society can be a problem for a democratic transition in Bangladesh?
We understood it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Please, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Sonia Khan, and I am a lawyer both in the UK and in Bangladesh. I've got research interest in democratic transition. I've got a book published to that effect. My question is, I think, to Tanyel and also to Selma, as well as to anybody else who would like to answer. Given that Bangladesh's problems, of course, is sort of not only like at the moment the challenges are sort of building institutions and separation of powers and all of that you've all mentioned so eloquently. Do you agree that whilst we do this, that fostering trust is a major tenet towards democratization? And if we do have to do it, then how do we do it? I mean, in terms of social media, they will have to be much more responsible for that. In terms of our diplomatic relationships with our neighbors, especially India, we will have to have sort of a renewed diplomatic endeavor so that they know that, okay, what has happened in the last 15 years and what is about to happen in Bangladesh, there is not a deep mistrust in whoever comes to power at the end of a free and fair election, if we can hold it. Do you think rigorous consultations in all these sectors is going to help, or what are your suggestions regarding fostering trust between citizenry as well as the neighbors and all other institutions? Thank you.
Thank you very much. This requires another panel, but our panelists will try to answer at least some of those, I'm certain. Sir, please.
Yes. My name is Nasimul Islam. I'm an environmental engineer, and I previously worked with the Asian Development Bank. Now, my question is with Robby, because I also worked in Indonesia. And I think there is a much similarity between Indonesia and Bangladesh because it's a moderate Muslim country, and culturally there is also a lot of similarity. So in Bangladesh, I think the main problem that I'm seeing is that the democratic forces or the liberal forces, they think that these Islamist forces are going to change the country to the Sharia rule and something like that. You know, it's like going to be something like Afghanistan or something. And this is the main kind of tension that's going on right now. Now, because you mentioned earlier, Robby, that in Indonesia you have this ulama council. There are other very similar groups like FPI and others, you know, in Indonesia. And how does, from Indonesian experience, how can the liberal forces or the Islamic forces, from the overall perspective of the country, they can remove this fear of these Sharia or all this Talibanization type of concepts in Bangladesh and kind of work together. How did it work in Indonesia? That's my question.
Thank you. Very, very good question. Thank you. And the last question goes to the madam.
Thank you. My name is Shitul Muna Orpi. I'm a student from University of Dhaka. Anyone can answer my question, but I would like if Tanyel Taysi will answer my question. So my question is very brief and short, that what do you think that how democracy or any greatest idea in the world can save or can bring peace in the world, where there is still exist countries like Israel who is killing people in daylight and there is no regret to them, and while there is countries those who are defending them that this is their right to defend themselves, while we are seeing that this is a genocide, this is a Holocaust. So thank you everyone.
Thank you. Okay, now we are going to have 2 minutes maximum for each of the panelists to try to basically summarize the answers to all the questions directed to you. So let us start from Touseef, please.
I must say, nothing is easy. And if we talk about the change, we have to struggle for it. And I remind, when I was a student, when I started some organization with my friends, I was attacked, I was trolled like anything. Every day there was some, people right against me, trying to bully me. So I think we need courage. We should have a courage to speak against what we don't, like or what we disagree. So we need to create an atmosphere where we can talk, we can express our ideas, whether some may like it or we called it let's agree to disagree. But it should be in a democratic manner. I mean, there should be no personal attacks, there should be no threats. Even when I stood for the municipal elections, there was death threats against me from the terrorists and from the extremists, because there was a boycott in the elections when there was municipal elections. But you need to be more courageous and you need to speak up, and it's very important that young women should come in front, and you should make some group in your university. You start dialogue with each other, you start talking to each other, you start understanding the problems. And what I have observed in Dhaka, I was talking to young people from 2-3 days, and that is I really I'm sad about it. The many of the young people who are talking to me, who were saying that we just want to leave this country, we want to go abroad, we want to take a job somewhere in America or some other places. But
10 seconds.
If you people leave, so who will build this country? You have to be here. You have to be here for the people. You have to be here for the future. Thank you.
Very important point. Thank you very much. Tanyel, there were several questions aimed at you, and you have only 2 minutes. I apologize.
Well, I'm going to go over. Thank you for the questions, and I would also like to speak to everybody that did direct questions to me after this, one-on-one. So please find me or I'll find you, because 2 minutes won't be enough. For fostering trust, yes, 100%, but it can't come after institution building. It has to come at the same time, right? Because, like I said, institutions aren't everything. They're important, but if you don't have a population that trusts institutions, you don't have the legitimacy of the government, right? And also, if they don't trust each other, you don't have social cohesion. So I think that it's going to be a really difficult process, because there is a huge lack of trust here, right? But it needs to happen through social cohesion activities, through things called sort of bridging institutions that are not just like a bricks and mortar institution, but they're activities or structures that bring people together. But people have to be willing to speak honestly and openly, and people have to have tolerance and understanding of the views of others. And that's not just a problem here in Bangladesh. That's a problem in a lot of countries. So totally important. It can't wait until after institution building. This interim government, I think it would be really important if they try to think about ways to do this. I'm sure they already are. It's a great interim government, but I'm really looking forward to seeing what they're going to do on this. As for the question about democratic principles and how can democracy bring peace when we have the situation like we have going on in Palestine right now. And again, I would love to speak to you person to person, one-on-one, woman to woman, the person that asked this question after this. As somebody that represents an organization that is based in the United States of America, I want to say that some democratic principles are more important than others, and I think that if we focus on the democratic principle of respect for human rights, we will see that we really need to respect the right to life of all people. And so maybe some of the democratic principles need to be placed at the forefront, and the respect for human rights would be one of these. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Hadza, please.
Okay, so shortly, I think that Bangladesh and Indonesia should build better cooperation in terms of how we can cultivate the culture of democracy in Muslim democratic countries. So one of the things that I would like to tell in this case is especially on how to mainstream moderation as a culture of Bangladeshi Muslim in this process of democratic transition. Why Indonesia is so successful in this context is because we are starting everything from madrasah and also from the ulama, from the scholars. When the ulama and the madrasah are getting more democratized, when they are trying to reinterpret the traditional values that they used to learn in the religious scriptures in madrasah, that will help them to be more open to other values. One of the most remarkable thing about Indonesia's democracy is that eventually in 2019, majority of Indonesian ulama decided not to call kafir as infidel anymore, but instead as non-Muslims. So this is a groundbreaking decision from the scholars of Muslim scholars in Indonesia, because it really transformed the nature of the relation between Muslim and Indonesia, and this is something that Bangladesh could do in the future as they are trying to transform their democracy into a better condition. And we should, of course, learn from each other in this context. That's all.
Thank you very much. Selma, hallelujah, there were no specific questions for you, I think. Do you have something to add?
I just want to emphasize a few points in less than a minute. The first one is it's very, very difficult to have a blanket definition of populism. And the populism and democratization or democracy are not always mutually exclusive. Sometimes democratically elected governments can be populist, and they may use populism to mobilize the masses for a certain development or political goal. Second one is populist social movements, and we have to make a distinction between populist social movements and populist regimes. Populist social movements can be a good way to topple authoritarian governments or even democratically elected governments in supra-constitutional processes. But they may not be the best, in building a democratic system. And the populist regimes in many places across the world, especially in the West, are undermining democracy and, of course, transforming liberal democracy to an illiberal one. So I think understanding this context, and specifically in the case of a transition, thoroughly examining the nexus between state legitimacy, which is very, very important especially for countries, underdeveloped countries, or countries that are not fully industrialized. The state has a purpose of delivering, and the state has the conception of democracy in underdeveloped countries, where there is an issue of social justice, creating wealth, and social transformation, is a bit different from the conception of democracy in developed countries. So the tension between the demand for autonomy and delivery of the state and having
10
constant
seconds.
legitimacy will be important in shaping how populist movements will evolve, I think, in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Selma?
I think the colleagues mostly elaborated all of the questions, but I will just one more time repeat in terms of trust within the democratic institution. I think that building capacities with younger force would be the next step towards that. So I truly believe in young force, and all of my thoughts, recommendations, and advices will be in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank all our panelists for shedding light on the most important threats to democracy, both globally, but also on the important reforms that are in front of Bangladesh. And we, of course, wish Bangladesh all the best in successfully implementing that. Thank you very much.